Hello! I recently got a new Terra Moons order in the mail, and I realized it's been a long time since I've updated my Terra Moons collection. So today I figured I would swatch out all of the Terra Moon shades that I have for you guys, and then I also pulled out all of the best comparisons slash dupes that I have for Terra Moons shades. So if you want to see what I've got and what may be good alternatives, then go ahead and just keep on watching and subscribe. I've been kind of going back and forth about the best way to film this, and I think what I'm going to do is split this video into two parts. So if you want to see comparisons, you can jump to that part in the video down below, but if you want to see the swatches of the full collection, we're going to start with that and then do comparisons. The first shade that I have is Cerise Waves. This is a metallic true red, and it does stain, just as a warning if you are someone who really does not like staining, but it is definitely like the most red metallic that I have. And this one I believe is priced at the $8 price point, but honestly I can't remember. I will link my previous video on Terra Moons down in the description, and that video will have more of a synopsis about like shipping, prices, discounts, all of that stuff. But keep in mind, they have done some price hikes, I believe, since that video. In this one though, we're mostly just gonna focus on the colors and beautiful swatches. Next up, we've got the shade Harvest, and I think that they might have discontinued this one. So if this is one you're interested in, do not worry, I have a dupe to show you in the second half. This one though, I would say is kind of a like coppery orange that shifts a little bit golden green on the side. Next is the shade Lightspeed, which I know is a favorite for many, including me. And this is a yellow, kind of like almost leaning on highlighter slash banana yellow, somewhere in between there, with a blue sparkle that then shifts to like a pink and almost a little bit like goldy orange. But I feel like mostly you see that blue, and you can tell that yellow base is there, but it's definitely sheer. You lose a lot of the yellow. This next shade is a classic from Terra Moons. This is the shade Meteorite. It's got a very, very soft pink base with a strong golden sparkle that shifts a little bit of a tealy blue. Next is Cesium. This, I think they have priced at $7 now. This is a beautiful kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like a gold with a greenish undertone. I kind of think of it as like an antique gold maybe, but you can see it is sparkly. There are a couple in this formula and they are all beautiful, and I'll point them out as we go through. Next is the shade Martian, and where Harvest kind of flips to a greeny gold, this kind of starts at that greeny gold, and it has a warm reddish brown base. Very smooth finish, just like Harvest. Next is Hot Spiced Cider, which is a bestseller. And I do have what I would consider to be a near identical dupe for this shade. This one is similar to Martian, but a little bit more true green and a little bit deeper in that base reddish brown color. This next shade is a Chameleon, so it's a little bit more expensive, but I gotta say, I feel like this is a slept on chameleon. It's probably one of my favorites. It's the shade Cosmic Noon, which I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but whenever I say that, it makes me think of Overwatch, like it's high noon. Let me know if you agree down in the comments. But this one has kind of a spring green base that shifts a little bit more olive gold and then a little bit peachy as well. Lots of similar colors within it, and so it's like a little bit more subtle within the shifts. but very beautiful. And it definitely does still have that dimension that you expect from the chameleons. Next is Neutron Star. This is another one of those cheaper shades. This one I would say is like a grass green with a pink sparkle on top, but whereas the sparkle in Lightspeed is very dominant, this is a much softer sparkle, and so you aren't getting like a super hardcore duochrome shift in this shade, but it's just a light pink sparkle sitting on top, if that makes sense. Next is one of the newest shades I got. This is the shade Serpens, and it's got a little bit more of like a lime green base to it with a blue sparkle that shifts a little tiny bit purple. Next is a shade that was an Amazon exclusive. I'm not sure if they are still selling these, but this is the shade Radial Velocity, and it's kind of the more high impact version of Serpens. So it's got a more blue-green base color on it. I'm not sure if you can see those base colors there, but then it does still have that blue sparkle on top that still shifts to a little bit of like a purpley pink on the edge, although I'm not sure I'll be able to capture it. I think you can maybe see it a little bit there. Now we've got another new to me shade. This is Enceladus, and it's a lot deeper than I was expecting based on like swatches and stuff I've seen. I would say it's almost got like a little bit of a grungy purple base, like a bluish purple. I'm not sure if you can see that base color right there, but then sitting on top is a sparkle that goes from a blue to a green and a little bit gold, I would say. Again, kind of similar to Cosmic Noon. There are shifts that all are within the same family, so it's not like shifting from like one side of the color spectrum to the other, but it still has a ton of dimension and shine and sparkle to it. I have been really enjoying this. I wore it on the eyes, and if you know, you know, I'm not a blue person, but this is like on the edge of blue that I really like to wear. This next shade I actually felt was pretty similar to Enceladus in some ways. This is the shade Atomic Division, and you can see there's definitely something similar about them. Atomic Division has more of a true blue base, whereas Enceladus is a little bit more of like a purpley blue, but the shifts on top are pretty similar. I feel like you're getting more of that gold from face on with Atomic Division, but I'm gonna be honest, I don't know if you necessarily need both. I feel like they are pretty similar to me. Next is the shade Half Moon. This is one of those that's like kind of iridescent, even though it looks blue in the pan. It's not like fully iridescent. There is a little bit of that blue base, but mostly you're getting what can be like sheared out to be essentially iridescent. And I kind of like that you have that option with this shade, that it can have a little base or it can be completely sheared out. But the base is a very light blue that then shifts a little bit like kind of purpley almost from this like tealy blue that you see here. Or maybe it's more of an aqua. I don't know. Color descriptions can be kind of challenging sometimes. For the time being, I'm gonna go ahead and switch to my other arm, and we'll try to get as many of them as possible on both arms. This shade is another kind of cult favorite from the brand. This is Terra Borealis. It's kind of a classic like blue-brown duochrome. It's got a little bit of a burgundy, reddish brown base with a tealy blue sparkle on top that also goes to kind of like a deep purpley pink. Then we've got Interstellar, which is the less sparkly and deeper version of Terra Borealis. So we've got a little bit of a deeper red base, and you can see it's kind of more of like a satin shiny kind of shade compared to the sparkle of Terra Borealis. I would say out of the two, I would definitely recommend this one over this one, but stay tuned because I do have some good dupe options as well. And I don't know why, but I feel like the blue isn't really capturing on my hand swatch, so I do want to show you on the finger swatch, that blue that it shifts to, because it definitely does shift. I'm not sure why it's not capturing on my wrist super well. Next is the shade Tidal Flare. This one's really interesting. It's a very deep blue base. I'm not sure if you can see that there, almost like a blackened blue. And then on top, it's got an orangey red sheen that also shifts to like a gold, leaning on a little bit of like a golden green. Now we've got one of my oldest Terra Moon's shades. This is Sarah's, and actually it matches my nails like perfectly. This is a nail polish from Cleona called Hilt, which is based on the eyeshadow with the same name, and it is a dupe for this shade Sarah's from Terra Moon's, but I don't have it, so I can't compare it for you today. But I at least figured I could wear the nail polish to show how similar they are. But this one has a kind of like periwinkle sky blue with a peachy gold, leaning maybe a touch golden green in the sparkle. Or, I mean, not really sparkle, it's basically just kind of a sheen on this one. And I actually think that the colors that these shift to are pretty similar, but obviously they look very, very different because of those different bases. Next, we've got the shade X-Ray, and just like the shade Half Moon, this is one that has a base, but also can be pretty much an iridescent when you smooth it out. So you can see it's got a very light blue base, and then the shifts in it go from like a blue to a pinkish purple to a gold. And just to show you again, this one can be sheared out to basically transparent, but keeps those different color shifts. This is the shade Moonshine, which will forever and always make me think of not another D&D podcast, but this is kind of like a gray blue base with a pink and silver, and again, maybe leaning on a touch of gold on like the far edges of what it shifts to, but I don't think I'll be able to capture that on camera for you. This is the classic shimmer shade Starlit. It's kind of like a grayish purple lavender color with a golden sheen on top. Guys, out of every Terra Moon shade I've ever bought, this is the only one that I've ever been disappointed with. This is Carina Nebula, and I just feel like the way that I saw it swatched before I purchased it is not symbolic of what it's actually like in person. So this one has like a deep black and almost like blackberry kind of base with a like reddish going on gold, kind of going on green sheen on top. But you can see it's just very dull in comparison to a lot of the other options from Terra Moon's. And I would honestly say to go with this one rather than this one. Then we've got the shade Chasing Comets. This is again another chameleon shade. I have been really bad about telling you what is what when swatching all of these, so I'm very sorry about that. But this again has kind of that same base color, maybe a little bit more, I don't know, bluish maybe, or like vibrant purple, whereas this one's a little bit more dull. But then on top, it's got this like pinky purple sparkle that then shifts to a pretty strong blue, teal, green, gold on the edges, which I'm not sure, you can kind of see it a little bit there. And again, I feel like this or this would be way better options. I would say avoid this one unless you like a softer, like less sparkly look or less like shifty look. This is definitely the more dulled down version. Although I will warn you, Chasing Comets does stain as seen by my fingertip right now. Next is probably one of my favorite chameleons. This is the shade Veil Nebula. This one is a deep plum, but this one's getting warmer in the base color than these other two. And then on top, it's got a golden sparkle that again goes to like a teal green kind of color. Very pretty, and great for like a single shadow smoky look. Next is one of my favorites. This is Shattered Stars. This to me is kind of like a multichrome, but make it approachable enough for every day. So it's got a very like dulled out purple kind of grayish base to it. I'm not sure if you can see it there. But then on top, it's got very similar colors to Veil Nebula, but it's a little less sparkly, I would say. It's a little bit more of a smooth formula. And something about that base color with these sparkles on top gives it like a very toned down, almost leaning on neutral kind of look. Now we've got Cosmic Collision. This is probably one of the most expensive Terra Moons shades that I own, and it is intense. It's so sparkly and shifty. Like, look at that. Oh my God, it's so beautiful. I will say I don't have any, well, I have one kind of dupe for this shade, but this is a color that like every brand has done. So be careful if you do decide to pick this up to make sure that you don't have any dupes, even though I don't have them here to show you today. This one is basically like the amped up version of Shattered Stars though. It's got, again, like a purple base, and then it's got a gold, teal, green, blue sparkle on top, and it is very apparent in the shifts. Although you can see there's something similar about how all three of these shift. Now we've got another one of my newest additions. This is the shade Ultraviolet. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm still kind of like gaining my thoughts on this shade. It's very flaky. Texture-wise, it almost kind of reminds me of that collection from Divina that I really don't like the shade Pink Flare I have from it, if you've seen any of my other videos. But it's very strong in that purple base, and then it has a shift to like a gold and teal and almost like a pinky that you can see on top here now, but it's not quite as shifty as something like Cosmic Collision where those shifts are apparent right from the get-go. This is a little bit more subtle, and like really only on the edges are you able to see those shifts. I don't even know if I'll be able to capture them on screen for you. And so it's just a very different kind of look, and I'm still gathering my thoughts. It's very expensive, which is why I don't know if I think it's worth the price yet, but I will keep you updated as I continue to explore it more. All right, I think we could probably squeeze one more on my arm. This is the shade Lunar Lavender. This is one of my top recommendations from Terra Moons. It's at that lower price point, kind of like lavender base on this one, like a dusty lavender. And then on top, it's got a pink, silver, and blue sparkle. It doesn't really shift, but you can definitely see all of those different colored sparkles on top, and it gives it a ton of dimension, and it's a beautiful one, especially for that $8 price point. So now I'll go ahead and show you all of the shadows that I have on my arms now, and now I'm gonna unfortunately have to wash off my arms to finish up, but I will put Lunar Lavender back down, so that way you can compare all of the shades I'm about to swatch to the ones that are currently on my arms. All right, like I said, I went ahead and put Lunar Lavender back up at the top of my wrist just as a touch point for comparing the rest of the shades to that first set of swatches. This next one is the shade Rosette, and I was going back and forth on whether or not to even purchase this. This is one of my newer shades, but in the end I decided to because I thought it was really beautiful, and I was curious about how similar it was to Starburst, which we'll be swatching next. This one is another one of those ones where like I feel like you can see the multicolored sparkles in it, but it shifts a little bit less like strongly to any one given color. So we have kind of like a dusty, like purplish rose. I'm not really sure how to describe this base color. Maybe like a dusty magenta kind of color. And then on top we have green, pink, blue, gold, like just a ton of different colored sparkles. And you can kind of see that shift. It's very subtle, but when you are in person, you can really see those different colored sparkles like on your eyes in the eyeshadow. Now, this is the shade Starburst. This is another one of the shades that I've had the longest, and it's kind of like the amped up version of Rosette. I feel like Rosette would be easier to wear day to day, but Starburst definitely packs more of a punch. It's just got more sparkle, a larger sparkle particle size, and it has a more apparent shift. But I also feel like I do see less multicolored sparkles in Starburst compared to Rosette. Starburst, you're mostly getting that like gold that shifts a little bit like bluish. And like I said before, Rosette, you see less of that shift, but more of that multicolored sparkle on top. This is the shade Hydra, and Carina Nebula is my least favorite Terra Moons shade, but this is my second least favorite. I just find it very flaky and kind of like patchy. I'm not sure if you can see as I'm applying it. It just like doesn't smooth out as evenly as I expect a Terra Moons shade to. But this one kind of has like a ruddy kind of brownish orangey red base, and then on top it's got a purpley blue sparkle that goes into a pink, and then a little bit golden on the sides. Next is the shade Deimos, and this is very similar texture wise to Cesium. Here it is. It's kind of like icy pinkish kind of color. Maybe not icy, I don't know, something that maybe like the silver on top makes it seem a little icy to me, but I would say it's probably more of like a rosy pink in the base. This is another one of my favorites. This is the shade Celestial Petal, and it's got a very sheer baby pink base to it with a blue to pink to, again, maybe just a touch gold sparkle on top. This one, great to top over other things, great as a wet looking shadow all over my lids on my skin tone, and is able to be used as like an inner corner and sheared out to a more iridescent shade like some of the others that we've talked about so far. Now we've got the shade Andromeda. This is another one that, even though it looks pink in the pan, I would say this is mostly iridescent, and again can be sheared out to be more iridescent depending on what you want. But this shade has a pink sparkle that then goes to a gold on the edges, and maybe if you squint it goes a little bit like goldish green, but you really got to be searching for it. Now we've got the shade Flare Star. This is a very flaky shade that you got to kind of work at smoothing out. But once you do, it's like a hot pink that goes to an orange and then a gold and then a little bit goldish green as well. That base stays hot pink in the flaky bits, but then it's pretty much transparent where those flaky bits are not. So it does look a little bit chunky. I'm not sure if you can see, but the shifts on it are insane. Now we've got another new to me shade. This is Halley's Comet. This is more of a Barbie pink with a blue to pink sparkle on top. And I'm not sure if you can see the difference in those base colors and why I say this is a little bit more Barbie pink, where this is a little bit more like hot, leaning on fluorescent pink. Next, we've got the shade Aphelion, which is another Amazon exclusive. This getting maybe a little bit, I don't know, deeper in the base compared to this one, but they are pretty similar. I would say this one, Halley's Comet, is just a little bit brighter. And then this one has a kind of like silver, gold, blue sparkle on top. And then lastly for the pinks, we've got Antares. This one has a very similar base color to Aphelion, but this one has a much stronger gold in it. And then that gold goes a little bit green and then teal as well. But the teal I find on the eyes is a little challenging to catch. We're gonna try to get the rest of these shimmers on this one arm. So first up, we've got the shade Palladium. This is that same formula as Sacium and Deimos, but this one is a rose gold. Very metallic and sparkly. Oh my gosh, do you see how beautiful and dimensional it is? This one I talk about all the time on my channel. Next is the shade Mocha Twilight, which is similar, but I feel like a little less just shiny and reflective, but that might be because of how deep that base color is. It's almost like a blackened taupe kind of shade, and there is a lot of individual sparkle in it, but it just has less dimension maybe than some of its lighter counterparts. Now we've got the shade Rubidium, which is my favorite out of this set of shades. This one I would say is kind of like a golden bronze kind of shade. Very neutral, very easy to wear. And then lastly, this is another one that I picked up with my most recent order. This is the shade Phoenix, and I'd gone back and forth on it for so long before finally picking it up. But what led me to it is I just felt like it's an orange iridescent that doesn't go green, which I really appreciate. It's kind of got more of a golden orange that then goes to a little bit more of a straight orange. And then on the base, it does have like a kind of whitish blue, but it does sheer out very easily to just keep that iridescent shine. Now let's go ahead and do the mattes on the other arm. This is the shade Sangre. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, and I don't know which of these mattes are still available on Terra Moon's site, because I know that they have gotten rid of a lot of their mattes, which is a shame because it's one of my favorite indie matte formulas. Next, we've got one of their neon mattes. This is the shade Jupiter and I. It's very like punchy neon coral kind of shade. Very cool. Now we've got the shade Beetlejuice, and I'm pretty certain this one is still available. This is like a macaroni and cheese kind of orange. Almost a yellowy leaning orange, but definitely still orangey. Now we've got Twilight, which is my favorite matte of all time maybe. I just love this shade of yellow, but unfortunately, I think this is one that is no more. But look at how pretty of a bright pastel yellow that is. This is the shade Shire, and I think this one is still available, but don't quote me on that. It's more of like an acidic-y yellow-green color. This is the shade Estella, which I know for sure is still available because I picked it up with my most recent order. This is more of a, what they describe as like lime green, and I would say that's a pretty accurate description. Now we've got the shade Mi Gente, which is a deep army green. And what makes this one really unique to me is it's a very neutral green. It's not too yellow, not too blue, just straight down the middle. This is another one of those neon mattes. This is the shade Fourth Dimension, and it's kind of like a green with a touch of blue. Next is the shade Daydreamer. This is just a pastel baby blue kind of shade. But again, a good version. I wish that they had kept their mattes. Maybe they're reformulating, maybe they're coming out again. I hope so, because again, just such unique colors. Now is the shade Ascension. This is a very pale purple, lots of white base coming through in this one compared to the next shade, which is Star Crazy. This one I think is considered a neon, but I view it more as a pastel lavender kind of shade. Definitely more punchy though than Ascension. And then last but not least, we have the pastel shade Utopia. I tried my best not to get that glob of Star Crazy that fell in it. You can see much more pink though. So here is that last round of swatches all together. Now let's go ahead and get into the comparisons aspect of this video. Since we just did the mattes, let's go ahead and stay in this realm for a little bit and do these comparisons. I feel like, unfortunately, a lot of my indie single shadow brands that I've bought mattes from in the past are no longer selling mattes, which kind of like restricted the ones that I wanted to show you for comparison. But first, we'll compare this bright red, which again, I pronounce as sangre, but I don't know if that's right. And I wanted to compare it to Luxie Dupe. This is their matte red. I feel like it's a little less punchy right off the bat and a little bit deeper, less like true bright red. But they are pretty similar. And so if you are looking for a bright red, this is a lot more affordable to begin with, so Dupe might be a good option. Next, I want to compare Star Crazy to a newer shade I just got from Dandelions Co. I just placed my first order. I've been very happy with them so far. Video coming at some point. But the Dandelions shade is called Orchid. I feel like maybe it's a little bit warmer of a purple, but the pastelliness of it is pretty similar, even if it's maybe a touch warmer. And then last but not least, I wanted to compare the shade Beetlejuice to the shade Tiger from Luxie. I feel like the Luxie shade leans a little bit more into that yellow, but they are pretty much dupes. Now for the shimmer dupes. So first I wanted to compare Harvest to the Luxie shade Burnt Toast. And I guess I should say, as I'm swatching these, some of these are more affordable options, but some of them are just color dupes. And so I just thought it would be helpful to show you just in case, if you're looking to buy Terra Moon's shades, to maybe show you any potential similar shades you have in your collection. So you can see, I feel like they're pretty much the same, especially in that base color. I will say that the Terra Moon's one shifts a little bit stronger to that greeny gold, but if you're looking for a nice copper metallic shade, I would say Burnt Toast is a good option from Luxie. This next one is probably the least dupey out of everything I have. I don't know if it's a recency bias though, but I wanted to show you it. So this is the shade Lightspeed, and I wanted to compare it to the new shade Shine Bright from Shine by SD. And again, I don't think they're the same, but there's definitely something similar about them, so I figured it may be helpful. I feel like Shine Bright has a stronger yellow base that you can see more consistently, and then on top it does have a blue, silver, pink sparkle. So the colors are the same, but I would say that Lightspeed is more of a duochrome and Shine Bright is more of a shimmer with multiple colored sparkles in it, if that makes sense at all. And then last, for the more yellowy shades, we've got Meteorite. This has a dupe from a ton of different brands, but two of the best ones that I have for you are Shine by SD Reserve number 2, which is essentially the same shade. They definitely have different textures, but color-wise, they are like exact dupes. I mean, look at that. Those are basically the same. But then also Champagne Punch was limited edition from Luxie. It is very, very similar though. And there are other shades like this from Luxie. I will link my complete Luxie swatch video. So if you want to see it and compare and find a closer shade at that $3 price point, you can. Now moving into greens, CCM is a pretty unique shade in my collection. Martian, I wanted to compare to Luxie Peacock. They aren't exactly the same, but I think that they are similar enough to be considered dupe-ish. Peacock has a lot less of a base color than Martian does, but you can see it does have that reddish base to it. And then on top, I feel like Martian is maybe a little bit more of like a grungy, chartreusey, olive kind of color, but the Looksy shade does have that same vibe, even if it's maybe like a little less punchy. But I will say the Looksy one does have more visible sparkle to it, and I feel like it has a stronger shift as well. Next is the shade Hot Spiced Cider, and this is what I would argue is an exact dupe. This is the shade Drip from Looksy, and you guys, I mean, come on. Those are like the same exact shadow. The Looksy one maybe is like a little less shiny, I guess, maybe, but it is such a minute difference that I think for $8 versus $3 on this one, you can definitely go with a $3 option and know you're getting essentially the same exact thing. Cosmic Noon and Neutron Star are both pretty unique, so we're gonna jump to the shade Serpens, and we're gonna throw in Radial Velocity just for funsies to compare to these others, but I'm gonna put it up here because I do recognize that this one's a little bit different from the rest. So this first shade I want to compare it to is Biennium from Copacetic. This one is a multichrome, so it's a lot more expensive than these others, but it does have a lot clearer of a shift to like that purple and blue compared to the other two from Terra Moons. It also has a lot less base color than either of the Terra Moons, so it mostly is just that sparkle on top. The next one I want to compare it to is one of my new Pastel Roses shades. This is the shade Fairy. I feel like it's similar to Serpens, but texture-wise it's pretty different. This one is much more of like a satiny kind of sheen shade compared to the sparkles in Serpens, and I do feel like this one goes to a more obvious pink than Serpens does, but there definitely is something similar to them, especially in those base colors, which are both kind of a light, bright green, although maybe Fairy is a little bit lighter and brighter. And then lastly, we've got JD Glow Prismatic, which is a shade I have been trying to dupe for the longest time because I do not support JD Glow anymore. This is definitely the closest I've found to a dupe, but they're not the same. I feel like the JD Glow has a little bit more of a strong blue to pink shift, whereas this one from Terra Moons has a little bit something more like silvery in it. Here are all of those comparisons again one more time though. Now I'm gonna wash off my arm so we can get into the more blue leaning shades. This one we're getting into one that I would again consider to essentially be an exact dupe. So this is the Terra Moon shade Terra Borealis, and I will warn you, this is one of those dupes that does require a little bit more effort, so I'm gonna put on just a touch. Oh, that's too much. Just a little bit of glitter glue from NYX to help our dupe out in comparison to Terra Borealis. So this one requires a little bit of an extra step, but if you're willing to do that, I do think they're very similar. All right, I just wiped off that extra glitter glue from my finger, and now I'm dipping into the shade Hydra from Looksy. This is a shade that's very flaky, which is why I put down that glitter glue to kind of help give it that same texture as Terra Borealis. But on top of the glitter glue, it's basically the same shade. I also wanted to go ahead and swatch Divina Pavillon, but I feel like this one is actually more similar to the shade Interstellar, although Interstellar is like maybe a little bit deeper, although I think you can see they're pretty similar as well. Now, this is one that in my head I feel like is similar, but this is one where you can definitely see the price difference. So this is the Terra Moon shade Tidal Flare, and then I want to compare it to the Looksy shade Dark Side of the Moon, which again has like a kind of blackish base, but then has a red sparkle on top that kind of goes gold. So it's definitely like the poor man's version, so to speak. But I think you can see that the colors within them are the same, even if the looksy one isn't quite as striking. Then I just realized I almost skipped the one that inspired me to do this video in the first place. So I'm gonna actually swatch both of these Terra Moon shade. This is Enceladus and then Atomic Division on top. They're so similar, I figured it's worth comparing this shade to both. This is from the newest Looksy collection. This is the shade Splash. And if you saw my Looksy video about the new collection, you'll know I thought that this was going to be like an exact dupe for Enceladus. And it is very similar in the shine, but very different in the base because Enceladus has a lot more base color than I was expecting compared to Splash from Looksy. But I think you can see that the colors that they both shift to are very similar. And I have a theory that if you put Splash over a deeper base, you'd get something close to Enceladus. I haven't tried this yet, but let's try it now. I didn't want to spend too much time on this, so I just went with a ColourPop matte that I found that I thought was pretty similar. So let's see how it looks. You guys, I mean, come on. Am I right? What do you think? Does this look almost exactly like Enceladus? Is this the better version? Because since it has a lighter base, you can do different stuff with it. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. I definitely think that Enceladus does go a little bit more like blue on the edge compared to the Looksy shade, which kind of stays in that greenish kind of color story with the gold. But let me know what you guys think. It also does look very similar to Atomic Division as well, though. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think down below. Now I want to go ahead and do the shade X-Ray. And this is one that base color, like looking at them in the pans, you might not think that they look very similar. But this is the shade Now and Maybe Later from Looksy. And even though this one looks like it might be more purple, I feel like the shifts within them are like the same. What do you guys think? This one, X-Ray, maybe goes like a little bit more blue, but I would say, again, for the price difference, the Looksy one wins in this category. Now we've kind of got a couple different ones going on. So I wanted to take the shade Cosmic Collision first, and I wanted to compare it to two shades. First, I want to compare it to this lethal shade called Singularity. I would say texture-wise, these are very different, but shift-wise, they are almost the same. But the lethal one is definitely much more smooth and maybe a little less shifty as a result. But you can see the colors and shifts are pretty similar. So for my European friends, this might be a good alternative. Although again, every brand has this type of shade. I also wanted to compare it to Cleona Royalty, which if you know, I think is a dupe for the shade Painted Lady from Looksy. And I just wanted to compare it, not because I think that they're like the same, but because I think a lot of people have a shade like this. And so if you do, I wanted you to see what that looks like in comparison to Cosmic Collision. So you can see Royalty keeps that base purple color a lot more than Cosmic Collision does, where you can kind of lose that base color like altogether. And then it goes to a lot more of like a greenish gold, whereas this goes a little bit more silvery blue gold, but they both do go to that teal as well. And I wanted to compare this shade Feels as well. This is from that newest Looksy launch. And I think that this is different than Painted Lady. It goes a little bit more gold. And I actually wanted to compare this to the shade Ultraviolet. Not because they're the same, but just because I think that they share something similar. And so I wanted you all to see. So Ultraviolet has that like pinky color that Feels just doesn't go to. But the base colors are pretty similar. And then they both go to like that gold. And then Feels goes a little bit blue. I will say I feel like oh my gosh, I'm totally off screen. I'm sorry. I feel like Ultraviolet goes a little bit more like punchy of a teal and green, but I don't know. I think that there is something kind of the same vein within these two. So let me know what you think. I'm still trying to figure the shade out, like I said. And then I wanted to compare Starburst to the Glaminatrix shade Gleam, which is actually more expensive. They're like exact dupes. So in this one, I would say go with the Terra Moons. But then I also wanted to compare it to Copacetic Cosmetics Transmutation. This one is flakier and harder to work with, but also is a little bit cheaper, so it's up to you. I know some people don't like this formula though, but color-wise, all three of these are like exact dupes. Next is the shade Hydra, and like I said, this isn't my favorite Terra Moons shade, and I think it's just like this type of color must be hard to formulate because I also really don't like this one from Divina. This is the shade Starfire. I feel like these are pretty similar. Starfire maybe goes a little less like purpley blue and starts more of like that pinky purple that Hydra goes to. And then I also wanted to compare it to King's Feast from Cliona. This one's more expensive, but it's also a lot higher quality, which I think you can see in the swatch. Next, we've got Celestial Petal, and I wanted to compare that to the shade Aloha from Touch of Glam. If you don't know, I am not a Touch of Glam fan, and I feel like this is a more expensive shade that performs worse. So in this, Celestial Petal definitely wins. Now we've got Andromeda compared to one of my newest shades. This is the shade Cutie from Pastel Roses, and these are like exact dupes. I did not realize that when I bought them, but they definitely are. I feel like Cutie maybe goes to a little bit softer of a gold, but they definitely do go to that same gold color. Now we've got Flare Star, and I want to compare this to the shade Centennial Wheel from Copacetic, but this is another one that I'm gonna need just a touch of glitter glue for. There we go. And when I say a touch, I mean like just a tiny little bit. I find that glitter glue, when you use too much, it kind of has like an adverse effect. And now I'm gonna use my ring finger to take Centennial Wheel and swatch that out. Centennial Wheel is a little bit chunkier, but if you use that glitter glue, you can get them to be like literally the same exact shade. And this one from Copacetic is $13 compared to almost $18 for Flare Star. And the Copacetic ones go on sale a decent amount. I know that for their anniversary sale, which is in early July, they typically go on sale for about $10. So you can get this one for almost 50% off if you're willing to use a glitter glue. Next is Halley's Comet. And for this one, I again need to use a glitter glue. So here we go, a little bit of glitter glue. This one that we're gonna compare it to is the shade Loving Magenta from Shine by SD, which I think is closer to like maybe that $5 price point. So again, a pretty decent discount, and you can use coupon codes at Shine by SD, although you can use them at Terra Moons too. So here they are. I feel like Loving Magenta is a little bit more of a strong duochrome, but I like Halley's Comet more because I like that sparkly blue that's throughout that shade. And then I really want to fit this last set of dupes on this arm, and then we'll go into the neutrals. So that first one I just swatched is the shade Aphelion. Then we've got the shade Antares, and in between them, I'm going to put Glasswing from Looksy, which I feel like kind of falls in between, although it's definitely closer to Aphelion. But I do think it's a little bit more gold than that shade. So there are those. So to wrap up, I've just got a few different neutral comparisons to do. I find that this formula is very special and honestly the most affordable version of this type of formula that I have found, but I did want to compare it. So this is the shade Kinda Posh from Glam Shop for all of my European friends. You can see it's just not as like high impact as Palladium is, but I do think that the color is kind of similar if you're looking for a rose gold. Now I want to compare Mocha Twilight to the shade Scapulet from Glam Shop again. This one has more dimension, but has that same very deep base color. It kind of sits in between Mocha Twilight and Rubidium though. And so the last comparison I want to do is Rubidium, and then I want to compare that to the shade, I think this is Gleam. No, Hey Poppy, I'm sorry. This is the shade Hey Poppy from JD Glow, and both Glam Shop and JD Glow are brands that I'm stepping away from right now. I'll link that video below if you're curious, but I do think that shade-wise, they both have something kind of similar to some of these Terra Moons shades. All right, well, that is my entire Terra Moons collection and my best dupes swatched. I know this was probably a long one, so I appreciate you watching. And like I said at the beginning, these are just the dupes that I have. There are a million dupes to pretty much every shade you can think of at this point. The indie makeup market is very saturated, and so it really just comes down to preference. And for some people, the higher price tag from Terra Moons compared to Luxie is worth it for how the shades perform and formulas and all of that. So it really is up to you. If you know of any other dupes, let us know in the comments below. We want to try to at least make sure we're not getting colored dupes, even if we're getting like the formula that we prefer. So let us know of any dupes you know of down below. And if you're looking for just a Terra Moons reference guide, I'm gonna link my friend Riley's video down below. She gets Terra Moons PR, so she has a giant collection and it's a super helpful video. I highly recommend that. So I'll have all of that information linked in the description of this video. And until I see you next time, I hope that you stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy. Bye!